we'll have a whole bunch of students who read XKCD and then show up at that professor's lecture and we'll say, hey, did you hear today's XKCD? What's that? And eventually they get bugged about it enough, and then they write me a letter or something, and I feel like, whoa, I thought this was a person I was writing about who was like a famous figure, and now I feel really weird about this. One of the, and so I would, so what I tried to do is, because I was always sort of conscious of this, so I would try to, like read a little bit, at least like in the Wikipedia article on someone before I did a comic that mentioned them. And I did this I did a comic about Richard Stallman. And Richard Stallman he's this figure from the free software, the open source, this community of the software community. He's really he's a foundational figure. He's not just like a vocal advocate on the side of like the good guys in the struggle over like freedom on the internet, openness, copyright against the companies and the corporations and government and this whole complicated mess. Not only is he like a super outspoken fighter on the good guy's side, he is largely the reason there is more than one side, like more than anyone else. You know, he's been in the trenches writing software. He's the GNU in GNU Linux. GNU Linux. He built many of those basic tools that we still use today, and he also has a lot of opinions, and they're very strong opinions, and he's right about like way too much of it. So it's like he's really out there, but I also like really respect him for being out there. But you know, I'll poke fun at him a little bit too. So I did this comic about him and how he sleeps every night with a pair of samurai swords on the head of his bed, and waiting for the day when at that point it was Microsoft, I guess, Apple and Facebook engineers will show up at in his house, challenge him to a battle to the death, and he'll be ready for them, which, to my knowledge, he did not actually do. But I made a little bit of a mistake in this because I didn't read carefully enough about Richard Stallman, and I had him use the phrase "open source will carry on," or something in the middle of a very noble piece of dialogue. And so my comic will auto-post most nights. Sometimes lately I've been slipping on that as things have been developed, but most nights it posts at exactly midnight Eastern. So I happened to like get up and check my email at like 12:35 or something. And my inbox already had 12 to 15 letters from people saying, you used the wrong, you had Stallman say open source. Stallman hates the term open source. And he goes back to this long sort of feud in the community. He prefers the term free software. And he would never say that. And this looks really glaring to anyone who knows anything about Stallman. Just going for it. And I was like, okay, sort of pedantic, but I'm not pedantic, so I can see how you're coming, what you're thinking there. So I'm gonna, okay, what can I do? Shoot, the comic is titled opensource.png. And it's already activated by RSS, and like you can't turn back the clock too much on that, because it's just gonna break everyone's feed readers. And so I was like, what do I do? Okay. And so I went in and I took the dialogue and moved the phrase open source out of Stallman's dialogue bubble into the bad guy's dialogue bubble, and I had them saying free software and moved that into his dialogue bubble. So the bad guys say open source, and Stallman responds with his preferred term, free software. And it still uses open source around it, but I figured that would be, like, I did at least have Stallman saying it, and I think I'm probably clear. And like the flood of emails stopped, and I was like, okay, cool. Nope. Maybe I'm worried too much. The internet is apparently not that demanding. And in fact, I didn't get any letters until like midway through the day. I got one letter complaining that the word open source was still too close to Stallman. And then really what I need to do is retitle the comic, retitle the file, and then put a note at the bottom explaining why open source is not the preferred term. And I get to the bottom of this email and then blink for a minute and scroll back up, and it's from Richard Stallman. And I wrote back and said, there's a point, like, I'm not going to edit the comments about this, but I totally really respect it. This is how it wound up that way. I'm sorry about that. He was nice about it, and it was a really good exchange. But the other thing that so ever since this happened, people have been showing up at least a couple of times. Have shown up at events that Stallman's at, dressed as ninjas with samurai swords. And this is something that happens a little bit. There was especially a period in the very early days of XKCD when very enthusiastic fans would try to like act out everything that I put in the comic. And I like deliberately made some that were like too far, like too strange, or involved solving equations that never been solved, or something that just so that like try to like tamp that down a little bit, because I was like worrying like I don't want to write about like how cool it would be to go camping at the White House, because what if like 50 people get shot by the Secret Service? So one comic that I did that people actually assumed that I had done was one of my earliest and still favorite comics was about this girl who builds a ball pit in her apartment, like a McDonald's playpen ball pit, putting up a baby gate at the door and then fills it about yay deep. And I thought the comic was cute, and I liked the idea, and I always thought that would be cool, but I always thought like that because of hygiene and because of like convenience, because like it would be fun for like an hour or two, I thought this was not a practical idea. And I thought, and I looked into it, and it was like, this is a little too expensive. And that would cost like, it's like you could get a good set of living room furniture, or you could make like a ball pit. But I put up this comic, and then a few months later, and this was when I was younger, around here, I think around the time when it went up, and then I moved up to Boston, and I got an email from someone who says, hey, I saw your ball pit comic, I really liked your idea, I did it too. And I was like, wait, you actually did that? And he's like, yeah, you know, I mean, he didn't do his whole house, but he like cordoned off part of his room and made this ball pit that was like, you know, he like had a lofted bed, and the area under the loft was a ball pit. And it was like, oh cool, I didn't know you could, like, I'm curious, where did you end up buying them? Like, I Googled this a little, but, and he told me the company, it was this company in Tinker Cotson's, Florida, that did these crushed tooth balls that were good, and it turns out there aren't a lot of places for consumers to buy these in like bulk quantities. But I was like, that's so cool, you know, you got them from there, how much do they cost? Like, okay, that's actually not too bad to make a smallish ball pit, you know, I spend that much on crap that I don't need, like a couple of video games nowadays or something. So I order a couple of boxes of these balls from Tinker Cots, and they arrive a few days later, and it turns out there's no way to ship these things that is not exactly the amount of space they're going to take up. So these boxes, one after the other, arrive, you know, and I've got like about a jacuzzi, a large, you know, hot tub jacuzzi size thing worth of playpen balls, and I unpack them in my room, and like I make this area with you know, some furniture, and then I set up a little fence and fill it with playpen balls, and invite people over who like hang in. And so like, and watch me do stuff, and so those things, you know, those things that are like, this looks like a really good idea on paper, like having someone play a violin at your romantic dinner, but then after a little bit it sort of gets a little awkward, and you're like, this isn't as cool as I thought. This was not one of those things.